Happy Wednesday. So this is going to be about why we don't compete with other coaches. I know a lot of kids are going back to their school programs, and we're glad that the athletes are getting back access to their high school and middle school coaches and other programs around the state, because that's what's best for these kids. They need to be with their team. They need, for mental health reasons, be around their team socially, but then also physically, they need that training. And I know that may be confusing coming from me, but we don't compete with what's going on at the schools or really other training places for the most part. Our training is completely different. We're not trying to do better what they're doing at the schools. We're trying to be a high-level supplement. And if a kid's not getting, well, let me just set the table here. At the schools, there's logistics that coaches have to deal with, real ones. It's difficult. I've been in those jobs. I've had those positions. I've worked in those situations. You have a lot of kids and your facilities are built for a certain purpose, and that's to get athletes strong, which has got to be the top priority, that they get strong. You need to introduce that consistently year-round for an athlete. Maximal strength training, 80 to 100% of what they're capable of doing, and visiting that several times a week. That's very important, and they need to continually do that. And in order to do that, there's logistical things coaches have to organize. With big groups, you can only do certain things, and they have very limited time. They have full-time jobs outside of those coaching sessions to organize sport, teach, and do a number of things. And quite honestly, most coaches at the high school and middle school level are more educated than a lot of the trainers that are out in the public, and they know how to organize a weight room and get athletes strong. And that's just the truth. A lot of them do a great job. And for us, our place is not to go take the place of that. What we focus on are the things that we can do on a high level that are not going to compete with that, and they're only going to elevate that and not get in the way of it. So, for example, you're not going to come over here and redo the squat you might have done 3 or 4 times at your school that week. We're going to focus on something else here. And where we feel like our purpose is, and this is where APEC has always placed itself, is focusing on rate of force development, power, speed, movement qualities, mobility, flexibility, stability. That's what we focus on. If a kid comes to us and he's not getting strength training at their school, we give that to him for free. And it's not that we don't touch strength. I don't want you to misinterpret. In fact, I'll bring some life to this. So most coaches are going to have 4 core lifts that they focus on. Now, a lot of high schools, it's a different 4. Some have 5, and they do those routinely multiple times a week, and they want the kids to get strong. And I'm behind that. Now, for our purposes, we're going to focus on things very specifically that will complement that, and we don't want to replace what the coaches are doing at school. We want to advance upon that and give people an advantage that's not going to stack or deter them from doing those things on a high level. So with that said, we focus a lot on 20 to 40% on resistance instead of 80 to 100. And the reason is because those types of velocity movements are going to yield the adaptations that we are naming ourselves responsible for. And those speed-specific adaptations happen in the fascial system. Your proprioceptors, or your spirit of athleticism, basically teach your body how to act and move. The proprioceptors live in the fascia commands the muscle structures. So movements are superior to muscles from what we do. That's what we're trying to do. Now, with that said, you got those 20, 40% loads, and really we want people to move faster than 1.5 meters a second. That's going to create density in the tendon and ligament structures. That's the kind of weight gain we want from APEC if people are only coming to us for a short-sighted exposure, like 2 times a week. 2 times a week is not a full training load. It's a supplement. Now, kids could come more, but if they're going to their school, we don't really recommend it. Okay? So why that? Because those things are really hard to focus on at school. There's safety factors. You have to have the right type of equipment to measure those things. We are fortunate that we have equipment that can measure the power output on every single rep. So I can look at wattage produced, even if it's a lightweight. I can take a kid that, and this happens a lot, maybe let's just say a 300-pound squatter and a 150-pound squatter. I can put them on the same machine, measure rate of force and power output, and sometimes a 150-pound squatter produces more power. And that can happen. And it's not that strength is bad, it's just for our purposes, we're going to focus on what we do for our communities and who we are. And that's not to replace what coaches do. and that's not to replace what's happening at the school. We can do that if they don't have a good situation for whatever reason, they're not able to lift, or we need to accommodate, and those things would be for free. But our focus is on speed and power, not just on the track. We're not running 50 sprints. We're working on technical movements, coordination, speed school is what we call that, and then we're gonna move fast. And when you move fast, you can't do 40 reps. You have to make sure that you run full speed. In order to do things fast, you have to do fast things. So that creates a lot of rest. And our environment at APEC is different than at a school. At a school, you have work capacity as your top priority and strength as your second. And really that should be the case. But here we don't have those things as a priority because people are coming to us as a supplement. And when they're coming to us as a supplement, we have a responsibility to deliver what we're focusing on. And if you look at a force velocity curve, which is basically rate of force development and how, areas of concentrated strength. So you have max strength that's, really high percentages, which kids focus on most. Then you're going to have true power development, okay? And submaximal strength is obviously in there between maximal strength and power, but power development around that 60%. And then you've got that 20 to 40, 40 to 60 range where you can do speed strength and you can focus on elastic qualities. And those elastic qualities can transfer over to movement speed. They can. Now they don't always, because here's why. If you do squat or you do a certain movement so many times, you're doing it at school and you're doing it other places, or say deadlift or bench press, that's not gonna, it's been proven that the conjugate system, some of those things don't cross over to sport if you're not doing things that bridge that gap. And I'm not talking about skill training, but there's been hundreds of articles because the conjugate system started way back in the 60s in Russia, maybe a little before, and I actually know Dr. Romanoff and some people that were part of some of those movements. Then in the 70s, it got popularized by Louis Simmons here in Westside Barbell, which did a great job with helping powerlifters have a different perspective on how to increase their maxes by lifting sub-maximal loads. But this was already being done in Russia. So the results yield really well for powerlifting and lifting more weight. The problem is athletes need velocity-specific adaptations that can apply to sport. Now, it's very hard to do these things unless you're a skill coach, but we have focused on this as our focus and built our entire facility, our equipment selection, and our philosophies around targeting this type of training, movement quality and speed. So when you talk about velocity-based training, it's not the same as the conjugate system. The conjugate system's been around forever. It's not that it's bad, it's just we don't need to do that here. That's not direct to athletic development. It's better just direct application to lifting more weight. And it's honestly more appropriate at a school than someone that is a supplemental coach and in the business that we're in. So when you talk about reactive strength qualities and you talk about speed and rate of force development, there's a lot of room to do those things and focus on those things as a supplement to what's happening at the school. And not only is it going to be something that helps them with their lifting because they're going to access their strength qualities faster, it's going to ensure that the gains that they make at school actually cross over into sport. Because doing a high velocity bench press is not always going to transfer into, or never transfer into throwing. In fact, Driveline proved that it does not transfer, that the conjugate method did not transfer into any gains for baseball players. So for us, for our purposes, and this isn't about baseball, but that's an example, is if you have a quarterback that you're training, or let's say you have any athlete that you want to move with speed, you've got to focus on movement qualities and you got to do those with high velocities. And you can do that outside of just running on a track. And you have to have specific types of equipment and you have to have a specific type of philosophy and you have to have the training to do that. And you have to have the time, more importantly. We couldn't focus on that if there was no base or no one else doing any work. Now, if there is no strength training, we're going to revert to that and do that on a high level. And we would still use a velocity, force velocity curve in order to ensure that they're improving qualities across that force velocity curve. Max strength, submaximal strength, power development, true power development, which with our equipment, we can find right on that curve where they're at. Percentages are just a guess, but you get on there and you see where they hit max watts, you can target that. And as soon as they get fatigued, you can cut the set because you are truly working on power. So from there, you go to reactive qualities, and there are all types of different terms that different people use for this. But inside of what we do from a resistance training standpoint, That's the focus. And that's why it doesn't conflict with work at schools or work with coaches. And that's why we want to support what the coaches are doing. And even places like a performance course and things like that, if they're at a school doing those things, it's not competition to us. Those kids should be at their school programs. This is different. This is a different focus. Movement quality, mobility, stability, flexibility, true max power, true max velocity. We want tendon and ligament adaptations that they're going to gain weight from that. You can gain weight from that as much or more than you can gain from gaining muscle. In fact, if you do gain muscle that is specific to the lifts that you're working on and you're overly exposing yourself to certain lifts, you're going to become more of a lifter than a mover. And that's factual. You will have adaptations. Let's say you overdo the deadlift. You'll have adaptations to your hip flexors and your glutes that are going to adapt your body to, even if you train it correctly, let's just say that not only do you get strong, but you get fast at that. You can have overdevelopment of the hip flexors and the glute maximus that can limit your range of motion in the frontal plane. I'm not saying deadlift is bad. What I'm saying is you better make sure you apply velocities to a lot of different types of movements and resistance exposures. And that's the one thing that we focus on with our athletes that are in the age that they can benefit from. And then I'll also say this. If you have a young kid and they are hitting that, so you have peak height velocity first. That's when you start getting that hormonal onset where your bones start growing. Things start aching. You can't put on weight or you're losing body fat because you're shooting up. I don't care if you're being trained by 10-time Olympic coach, Dan Paff, or the greatest coach in the history or whatever. You're not going to put on weight during that time. And if you do, you need to be careful because you could be teaching the body to create sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is just fluid and isn't going to contribute to movement. So a doctor, it wasn't Dr. Wayne, it's another guy from Washington, proved that even 5 pounds of dysfunctional mass, even if it's muscle, can drop performance by 15%. And that was in, I think, 2014, he proved that. So it's in Washington, I can reference it later, but you don't want that. What you want is these natural adaptations from speed to happen when the tendon and ligament structures feel the need to create more density, and the fascial system helps create myofibular adaptations. And these myofibular adaptations are functional strength. That means your body is going to literally shape around the demands of what you train it for. Now, if you train it to be a power lifter, and the schools are doing, that's not the problem. It's when you overdo it and do it other ways, your body is going to be more of a lifter than a mover. And that's a fact. You don't have horses that can be race horses and that can also work in the fields all day plowing. Once that horse is plowing, they can't race anymore. It doesn't work like that. So when you're doing extra work and seeking extra work for your kids or seeking something different, you don't need to find somebody to redo what they're doing at the schools and do it better. Okay, you don't need someone to go off of a 1960s, 70s system as a supplement when you are already getting training at the school for strength training, and strength training that is vital for their development. They do need it. But to go further on that, there's not a lot of things you can do that won't get them stronger. That's not hard to train. I mean, I'm just being honest. Now, you want to be safe, but there's not a whole lot of things that you can't do to make them stronger. All it takes is consistency. That's it. And it's going to get them stronger. Now, there's better ways than others, but you're going to get them stronger. So, I just wanted to breathe some life into that. I know a lot of kids are going back to school, and there's some there can always be some confusion with, I think, coaches and parents on what are we doing here? Why is it different? And do we compete with them? We don't compete with them. Whatever school you go to your program. If you go to Grace, go to Camp of Champions. You go to some of these places, like, even performance course. I know those guys. Like, you can do. There's a lot of people that do both, and it's fine. This is different focus, different concentration. We are the sprinkles on the cupcake, not the cupcake, and we understand that, and we have the capability to do those other things. But with youth athletes, it's not our focus. Now, I have philosophies on middle school kids. I think you can train some of those qualities too early, and you can create some from bad situations. I mean, I'm 5'9" on a good day, and my brother's 6'2". I was lifting every day in middle school, and incorrectly. I didn't have professionals around me doing that. In fact, I was doing things outside of what my coaches were showing me at school. It was my own fault. But I think that those things can yield they can create some problems when you do have that hormonal cocktail. And when you hit peak weight velocity, which is when you actually have hormones that can change your cross-sectional muscle fiber, and that means you can get hypertrophy from strength training, and also you can get hypertrophy from velocity, and you can get really sore from high velocity movements as well. That's when things start changing for the athletes and what they can be exposed to and what's actually appropriate. I think a lot of times parents and kids want to do advancements. Advancement is not based on what they're capable of. It's based on what's appropriate, and those are two different things. And we can make a lot of money selling kids on what's advanced or doing stuff, treating them like little men and little women, but that's not appropriate. So I'm not gonna. It's been proven wrong time and time again. If you read and you're in our field, so we don't do that. We don't do a lot of those things with middle school kids and developing athletes. So again, just some information for you. Hopefully it's helpful. Posted a blog today also about why skinny guys can throw hard. Look, we got people that put on 20, 30 pounds here in a short stint, but that's because their body was ready and it was adapting to the exposures that we're putting in place in the program, not because we're trying to gain weight for the sake of gaining weight. And if you're a parent that thinks that gaining weight is the key to performance, you're not educated on the realities of what that is. When you force weight gain, you have neurological regression, meaning your body loses coordination for a period of time. You want a natural weight gain that is balanced on the tendon and ligament structures as for density to velocity and movement skill. And then you also want hypertrophy that's myofibular, not sarcoplasmic. If you're doing powerlifting as a means to do that, or bodybuilding as a means to do that, it's not that you're not going to get weight gain. It's that weight gain might not yield the movement characteristics that you want. All right, and I'm not talking about lifting 4 days a week. I'm talking about doubling up and doing things repeatedly in a system that is meant for power lifters. So that's it for today. I'm going to continue to talk on more and more topics as people have a lot of questions, and I want to make sure that if we can't help people in our spaces, we can help with some decisions outside of it. So hope you guys have a great Wednesday. I'm getting some people ask me, did y'all think I was going to talk about something else today? Have a great Wednesday.